Hi everyone, I'm Cal Spriggs. Today I'm going to show you how I built an epic Gallowdark terrain tile for playing with Warhammer 40k, Necromunda, Kill Team, and other sci-fi wargames. I've always liked games like Space Hulk and the idea of ship battles and wargaming, so ever since the Gallowdark terrain was announced, I've wanted to pick up a set. So of course, when I finally had time to look at it, I went straight to the website. No problem, I thought, to pick up enough for a small battlefield, just enough to play some small-scale battles on a ship, right? I was greeted with currently unavailable and $125. Now, I'm all for GW making money, but that seems a little extreme for the small board that we're talking about. Easy care, I have a 3D printer, so I figured I could make the components. The thing with that, I didn't want just a flat table, I wanted something with some depth. I really liked a video done by Eric from Eric's Hobby Workshop where he did a section of ship with Gallowdark terrain. I wanted mine to be a bit more modular though, so I decided to make several 1-foot tiles that I could arrange, and I wanted multiple levels so I could have models fighting above and below the main decks. I started out this first tile as a bit of a prototype. I had files I'd found online and scaled, and I wanted the whole kit to be compatible with both the existing Gallowdark terrain, in case it did become available, and my existing Necromunda Hive terrain, which has walls at 50mm, around 2 inches in height. The first thing I did was cut out a 1-foot by 1-foot section of 1/4 inch MDF. This gave me a sturdy base that I could build up from, and also offset the depth of the Necromunda tiles that I used, so everything should be around the same height if I put them side by side. I wanted depth here, so I put one of my 3D printed floor panels on this level along with some plastic mesh to look like deck grating, around which I was going to build up substructure for the deck and all the piping and industrial components of the ship. I used 3D printed support sections 2 inches high, as well as some scaled tunnel sections, also at 2 inches, to build up supports for the deck panels that would go over the top. After that, I had some sections of tubing that I had bought online and a variety of found materials and bits that I'd collected over the past couple of years as I started making terrain. You can see I used the supplement bottle as a big tank, and I experimented a bit with different piping sections until I got a look that I wanted. I didn't want to make it too crazy in here, as I wanted to add lighting below decks, and from lots of experience gaming, I know stuff often falls into hard to reach places, so I wanted it clear enough to retrieve fallen models or bits. I started closing off the underdeck, trying to leave open areas for lights to shine through to show all the internals of the ship, while still making it enclosed so models wouldn't fall inside, and still to make it playable. It was fun to add little details here and there, and one thought I had was a sort of prison-style window where from one end you could look in and see the interior but not access it. With the subdeck walls done, I primed it all and I was pretty happy with how it looked. That was until I noticed that I had walls on 3 of the sides, but I'd somehow missed putting walls on the 4th. I'm not really sure how I spaced that. It worked out though, because I had just bought my son some Star Wars Armada starter set, which had these thick cardstock tokens. They were punch-outs, and I couldn't help but notice some of the cool patterns left behind, and think these would make interesting wall sections. Cutting some to size was just a matter of measuring everything, finding some sections that were the right dimensions, and cutting those sections out. Since this was cardstock, it was all sturdy enough to hold up for gaming, and I just needed to wait for the weather to get nice enough outside to prime them, and then I could add them. With the model primed, I could begin painting. I started in right away with burnt umber craft paint. I got going quite a bit before I realized that I probably should have been putting the other colors on first, and then coming back to make them look rusted. Sort of a simple mistake, which thankfully didn't cost me anything but a bit of time. Speaking of time, don't forget to like and subscribe, because we're about 50% of the way through this video, and I wouldn't want you to forget. The first section of pipe, I went with a bright yellow. I wanted it to contrast really well against the dark gray, and it also would stand out well once I put lighting in. I went on the longest set of pipes with a sort of aqua color. I wanted to show it representing water or a coolant feed. Having served on ships, I know the colors of ship piping is standardized, at least to an individual vessel, if not always between all ships. So I wanted the different colors of piping and conduits to suggest their purpose. Aqua meant water or coolant, red for flammable liquids and fuel, yellow for lubricants, and so on. That helps with telling a story, and really all good terrain like this should tell some kind of story when you look at it. I used a sort of stippling technique that I recently tried out on a Necromunda junker vehicle. It worked alright there, but painting it here really shined, enabling me to get a rusty patchwork look to the lower sections of the ship. This was especially true with the big storage tank, which took on a look of a dangerous volatile chemical tank, slowly rotting through the tank and seeping outside. I love the idea that this thing is primed and ready to explode with just one misplaced shot. Once I had the basic colors on, I went through with burnt umber and I really weathered everything, giving it a rusty, grimy look, and following that up with a brighter orange for really oxidized patches of rust. There's not really a science to this, it's more of a Bob Ross style of happy grimdark bits of corrosion here and there. Happy accidents and all that. This thing is meant to be seen from multiple angles, so I had to paint corrosion not just on the interior and from the top, but also along the sides and the tunnels. The future tiles would press up against it, but I also wanted some flat tiles later on that this would be up against, and with it being modular, I wanted all of the walls to look complete. I went back and forth on the idea of graffiti like I used in Necromunda, but I decided against it and I wasn't sure how much of that would show through the deck plates anyway. With the painting complete, I hit everything with multiple layers of brown wash. The intent here is to give it all a further grimy, weathered look and to tie everything in together. After all, this is the grim darkness of the far future. They forgot how to clean sometime in the 30th millennium. I didn't really care if the brown wash pooled in certain areas. The staining from that would help sell the idea that various fluids have been leaking down here for centuries. My only concern was not using so much that the MDF warped, and I didn't have any issues there. The weather warmed up and I was able to get the panels in that I'd cut for the back wall that I'd forgotten to put on. I wanted the interior lighted, so this was my first experiment in that regard. I used some fairy lights I ordered on Amazon. They were kind of a pain for this though, as I had to bend and fold the wires to get the lights where I wanted, and I just didn't feel they were bright enough. Still, it gave me a sense for how much I could see through the deck panels that I'd 3D printed, so I could judge things a bit more. With the stub deck done, I started working on the deck plates that I'd 3D printed. I found these on Thingiverse and I modified them a bit so that they had open sections to see below the decks. This was the first tile and I tried a few different things here, wanting to paint it up to stand out but not too much. I started with the contrast blue that I used on some of the flat panels before I transitioned to apothecary white on some of the other panels. I further used red in some areas over the open deck plating to signal there was a hazard there. I also used some contrast yellow to pick out the details that would be brass and to make the deck plating pop a little bit more. I should also mention that I magnetized all of these deck plates because I wanted to be able to work on the underdeck for the lighting and also to keep that area somewhat playable. Also, I knew if I glued the top on, inevitably something would fall down there and I'd have to tear the whole piece apart to get it out. With the colors on, I went back with burnt umber on the deck plates to give it a rusted, weathered look. I alternated with thicker and thinner variations, in some cases thinning it down to something similar to a wash, and in other areas putting it down really heavy. This allowed me to get a rusted, weathered look across the entirety of the deck. As I was doing it, I was sort of worried that it would just totally fail, but as it dried, it turned out really great. Overall, it was a relief, and as the deck came together, I felt it was finally there as far as getting this thing playable. I love the idea of using this not only for Warhammer 40k and Necromunda, but also for playing out boarding action style scenes in some of the books I write. Stuff like this is great to help me visualize where characters are and what they're doing during the chaotic events of a boarding action. Thinking back, I realize I've written a lot of those types of scenes. And whether it's a crew of mercenaries exploring a derelict ship or a band of trained Marines fighting off attackers, it's a science fiction staple that just feels exciting. It's sort of the equivalent of exploring a dungeon in D&D, I suppose. You have the same sense of discovery, the darkness lit only by whatever light you brought with you, and the dangers that lurk just out of sight. With the burnt umber down, I went through with a piece of sponge and added orange spots for further oxidized metal. This added just a bit more color and tied it together a bit. I love how even with the lights on down below the decks, you can still see areas of color. The next step shouldn't be much of a surprise. I went through with a brown wash to grime everything up a bit more. The wash settles into those smallest recesses and it drips down below too, so it makes the deck plates and what's below them fit together a bit more. It's always a relief going through and getting the wash on there, as at this point, for better or worse, the project is basically done. Since this was my prototype tile, I knew I had a lot more work ahead of me, of course. But for now, I tried not to think too much about that. And here we are, the big reveal. I've got to say, I love how this thing turned out. The lighting down below really pops and it gives it a sense of depth that the flat cardboard tiles in the box set just doesn't give. The tunnels down below allow models to access other parts of the ship and bypass doors and walls on the deck at the cost of being open shooting galleries to the forces down below. I have 5 more tiles to go to make enough for even a basic playing area, so be sure to subscribe to see the other tiles as I put those together too. I have plans for themed tiles like a reactor, a foundry, maybe a tile that's damaged or partially flooded. If you have some ideas of what I should do, by all means comment below with suggestions. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.